My name is Lee Motter. Um, I was inducted into the service in February the 10th, 1943. At the time I was 19 years old. Um, and then from then I took my basic training south of Fort Monmouth. It was about 16 weeks, I guess. It's a long time. You forget a lot of these things. And after that, I went back up to Fort Monmouth for some additional training. And then from there, I was transferred out to Camp Crowder, Missouri, where I was assigned to the 526 Signal Company. And we got our advanced training in Camp Crowder, Missouri. So at that time, I was given my own platoon and became a sergeant first class of a platoon of 33 men. And then from Camp Crowder, we got our orders to go overseas, and we went to Fort Dix in New Jersey. And from there, we got on board ship. I don't know whether you ever heard of the Queen Elizabeth or the Queen Mary, but at that time the Queen Elizabeth was the third biggest luxury ship liner in the world at that time. And we got on board the Queen Elizabeth. There was 18,000 troops on board ship. So we took off from New York, and 5.5 days we landed in Glasgow, Scotland. And then from then I went into England, Blackburn, England, and we got our gear together and everything, and then I went across the English Channel into Europe from Southampton, England. We went across the English Channel on a New Zealand boat, and off the shores of France. We got off the ship on rope ladders and landed and embarked on what they call the LCI, which was landing craft infantry. And from there we went in and landed on the shores of England, or in France. From there on, this was after D-Day. So then from there on, we made our way up to Liège, Belgium. And we went right straight through France into Liège, Belgium. And then in December of 1944, I was in the Ardennes Forest when the Battle of the Bulge started, so I was involved in the Battle of the Bulge. Altogether, my service, I got 3 battle Bronze Stars, one for southern France and one for the Battle of the Bulge and one for the Rhineland campaign. After the Bulge was, a little history on the Bulge. I don't know whether you know what the Bulge is all about or not, but this was at the time when Hitler himself had decided that he's going to make his last stand. And he made in December, it was bitterly cold. I mean, it was one of the coldest winters they ever recorded in Europe at that time. And he had decided that he mustered all these troops, and they were going to make a massive push and try to push the Allies out of Belgium and France, and he still thought he could win the war. He was the only one. His generals didn't think so. Nobody else thought so, but he did. And of course, back in those days, the generals couldn't do anything without Hitler saying, okay, let's go ahead and do it. So he ordered this massive attack, which eventually was called the Bulge, with his intentions were to go to take over Antwerp, Belgium, which was a big a seaport. And then he thought from there he could supply his troops and he could regain Europe again. Of course, it never happened. He was stopped, and after the Bulge, after we got things reorganized and everything, then I entered Germany at a place called Aachen, Germany. and we went pushed on through up into Mannheim, and then from Mannheim we went in and occupied Bremen, Germany, which was up in the North Sea. And at this time, this was in the latter part of, almost the end of April sometime, the end of April, beginning of May, because when we got there and we captured Bremen, we got orders to stay put, that the Germans had signed the peace treaty, or had surrendered on May the 6th, I believe, the 6th or 7th day of surrender. So at that time we were ordered to stay there, hold the city, and wait until we got relief, and so I was in Bremen, Germany for probably about 3 months until they moved in what they called an army of occupation, and they had in charge of that army of occupation, they had a general, which actually took over as the mayor, really, the mayor of Bremen, Germany. And once he came there and got his troops in line and stuff, we were relieved, and then I headed back toward France on the way home. We got back into France, and by now there's thousands and thousands of troops. There's camps all over France. We're waiting, trying to get home. And at the time, we thought we were coming home. But when we got there, we found out what was happening is they were re-equipping us, and we were going to get on board ship in England and go straight to the South Pacific to help finish the war in the South Pacific. And of course, before we got on board ship, thank God, Truman ordered the bombing of the atomic bombing of Nagasaki and what was it, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which a lot of people today look at it as something that was one of the most brutal things that ever happened. But let me tell you, that decision that he made saved hundreds of thousands of American troops, because if we'd ever had to invade Japan from the shore, we'd lost 100,000, maybe a million troops. And so by bombing them and forcing them to surrender, all those American lives were saved. So although now people are looking back at it and they're criticizing such a brutal thing was done, but they don't realize what would have happened if he wouldn't have done the bombing. So we saved American lives, hundreds of thousands of American lives, maybe my own. You never know that, you know. So then, after that, well, then it was easy street. I got on board a Liberty ship at Antwerp, Belgium, and then we had quite a trip home. We got caught in a hurricane, and it took us 17 and a half days to come home. By the way, on the way over, we went over on the Queen Elizabeth. On the way over, it only took us 6.5 days to get there. It took me 17 and a half days to come back. But anyhow, I finally got back, and we came right back into Fort Dix again, and from there I went to Indiantown Gap, got my discharge in December of 1945. So that's the end of the tour. I mean, that was it. But it's not fun, and we should always consider when we're going to go into war that it's for our own protection and for the protection of self. We should not go to war just to go to war, because I think nowadays it seems like there's a different people think different nowadays than what they did back. During World War II, I would say probably 98% of the people in the country were behind you, and everybody was working for the same thing. Now we got so much arguing and distension and everything among people about the war that's over there, and that really hurts the morale of the troops themselves. They're over there trying to do a job, and I really would not want to be in the shape that they're in. Back in World War II, you knew who your enemy was, and you know there was a distinction. Over there, you don't know where the next guy standing next to you. There might be a guy with a bomb to blow you up, and they got a tough job, but it's a job I really think that we have to do, because while we're doing that and fighting them over there, while they're not attacking us in this country, so it's a tough job they've got, I'll tell you. But World War II, there was 400,000 casualties, 400,000 killed in World War II. That's in the Pacific and the Atlantic and the European campaigns. You know, it's a lot of people.
Yes.
A lot of young people. You know, like I say, at that time I was 19 years old when I was in, 20 years old when I was over there. A lot of those kids now. I was a kid then too, and a lot of those kids then never had the pleasure or the good graces of having a family, getting married, having a family, or anything else. So it was a great sacrifice. It was a great sacrifice, but it was well worth it, because who knows what would have happened. The freedom we got now may well have been, we've got it now because of what happened back in World War II. Because if we ever get to the point to where we allow somebody to come in here and take over our country, then we lose our freedom with it. So
were you married at the time when you went into the service?
I was married and had twins.
You were married already?
Well, I didn't have them. The twins were born when I was overseas.
Overseas.
Yeah. In fact, they were a little over a year old before I ever got to see them, because they were born when I was over in Europe. Yeah. So that was a little hardship on the wife too. Right. But
did you have your own personal one grand?
No, I had a 45 and also carried a carbine.
Carbine.
Yeah.
And how did they transport you over there? Were you all foot, or did they transport you?
There's only one way you travel. Two ways you traveled. Two ways you traveled in World War II. Well, three. You either went by train, by truck, or you walked. So most of it was walking.
Walking.
Right, and then transportation by truck. A lot of times, it depends on what the situation was.
Right.
There were times when there were lull in the combat and stuff like that, you know. And in fact, I was fortunate enough right after the Bulls, before we made our push into Germany, when we went across at Aachen, I was fortunate enough to get what they call R&R, rest and recreation, relaxation for 3 days, and I was fortunate enough to go back into Paris, so I was in Paris for 3 days and really enjoyed that. Yeah.
Do you have any questions for Mr. Wine? You've been awful quiet.
Anything you want to ask, I'll be glad to try and answer it for you. There was an awful lot of sacrificing being done back in those days. But it was something that had to be done, you know.